After a big riding holiday like the one we've just been on in Whistler, your bike may have taken a lot of abuse and had minimal looking after. So these are the things to check and work on after a riding trip or even after a big hard ride. My bike didn't miss a beat in Whistler, so I need to repay that favour, and the first thing to do is wash it. Almost seems a shame to wash off that Whistler dust. There you go, it's nice and clean now. I rode this bike hard in Whistler for 10 days without doing too much work to it. All I did was clean it, lube it and check the bolts occasionally. So now it's time to give it a really good check over and see if I've done any damage and what I need to work on. So I actually like to start at the rear wheel. I know this doesn't make much sense starting at the back of the bike, but I do know from experience that riding rough downhill trails for a long time on a relatively short travel, well 160mm travel bike, but it's no downhill bike, the rear wheel takes a lot of abuse. So let's start with the rear tyre. Mine actually doesn't look too bad, but this is somewhere where if the middle is really worn out but the side knobs are okay, I might think about keeping that tyre, cutting the middle out and keep that as a semi-slick. And a really good way of saving some money is actually just swapping the front tyre onto the rear and then just buying one new tyre to go on the front. It's a bit of a money saving tip because your front tyre probably isn't too bad. Now time to actually check your rear wheel. Go around just squeezing the spokes and they shouldn't move much at all. I'm running this carbon rim, so they don't buckle at all, carbon rims. So really your spoke tension shouldn't really change, but I'm just going to go around and check for any damage, anything like rocks picking up and just scratching the side of the rim, but mine's looking pretty good. Do the same for your front wheel, so check the spoke tension, the rim condition and retrue it if necessary. I also noticed actually that my tubeless valve did come loose, which is unusual, but again, probably worth checking. Now make sure your suspension, so both your fork and your shock are really clean. I like to use a rag as well, just to go around the stanchions and seals, make sure they're really free of any dirt. They look nice and black and not sort of muddy and dusty. And you can also spray a tiny bit of lube on them. Just be careful not to overspray and get anything onto your brakes. Now there's two things that are really going to make your bike feel fresh after riding it for a long time, and that is new grips and new gear cables. Your gear cables will often get friction in them, and because you're riding the bike you don't really notice them getting worse until you put new cables on and it just feels amazing. So grips and cables will make your bike feel like new. Whilst we're on controls, I would also seriously think about bleeding my brakes. The oil can get contaminated, go all black and get air into it as well. So think about that, freshen up the oil in there, just bleeding through some new oil and that can make them feel a lot better. Actually checking my rear brake caliper, I can see that that metal spring that sits in between my brake pads is actually getting really close to touching the disc. So it is time to replace those rear brake pads. A little bit like the tyres, if you're really frugal, you can actually stick the front brake pads into the rear, or just think about buying one pair of brake pads because actually your rear ones tend to wear out quicker than the front. Finally, I'll go around the bike and give it a full bolt check, making sure that all the bolts are tight, just getting that torque about right. I tend to just do it by hand rather than use a torque wrench, but make sure they're all nice and tight, but don't over tighten them, and then lube the chain and the bike is ready to go again. So my bike is clean, it's shiny, and it's ready to ride again. That's really satisfying after really punishing it for a week in Whistler. If you want to see how to prepare your bike for a holiday, click just up there. And if you want a more in-depth video on how to change your gear cables, just click down there. Click on this GMBN logo to subscribe, it's totally free. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video.